Good morning, friends. Pastor Margaret is away today with her family. I'm Janie Foy, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to Meeting for Worship at New Garden Friends Meeting. I'm mindful that today it is a full year since we've been able to gather in person. And I find myself very grateful for the technology that's enabled us to stay connected during this extraordinary time. And from the efforts and technical expertise of friends like Alan, who've made it possible for us to gather virtually for Meeting for Worship. I'm also grateful that friends who are not able to attend in person even prior to the epidemic for reasons of health or distance, and for those friends who did not even discover us before we met virtually, these friends have been able to join us for the first time. So I want to say a special welcome to these friends. We're so glad that you're with us. You're all welcome here among friends.
Good morning, friends. Our reading this morning is from Exodus chapter 15, verses 22 through 26. I'm reading from the New Revised Standard Version. Then Moses ordered Israel to set out from the Red Sea, and they went into the wilderness of Shur. They went 3 days into the wilderness and found no water. When they came to Marah, they could not drink the water of Marah because it was bitter. That is why it was called Marah. And the people complained against Moses, saying, "What shall we drink?" He cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a piece of wood. He threw it into the water, and the water became sweet. There the Lord made for them a statute and an ordinance, and there he put them to the test. He said, "If you will listen carefully to the voice of the Lord your God and do what is right in his sight and give heed to his commandments and keep all his statutes, I will not bring upon you any of the diseases that I have brought upon the Egyptians. For I am the Lord who heals you." So as Janie mentioned, today marks a year since the day that New Garden Friends Meeting shut the doors for in-person Meeting for Worship. I remember that first Sunday well because as someone who rarely has Sundays off, I was delighted to have what I believed would be a short break. My family and I went to Hanging Rock for the day. We were maskless at that point, most people were still, but we knew to keep some distance between ourselves and others. When we returned home that afternoon, I recall feeling anxious because we'd gone to the visitor center and we touched some things. And even though we had kept distance from other visitors and immediately sanitized afterward, we were unable to stop ourselves from worrying for the next 2 weeks that one of us maybe picked up COVID while we were there. And as I think back on that, all that anxiety, I realized that it probably never completely lifted at all. There's just been an underlying feeling of anxiety and dread inside of me for a year now. And I wonder if the same is true for all of you. The weeks following were memorable. Truth be told, I remember them fondly because energy was high. Attitudes were mostly positive. We were going to get through this thing together. We were going to find new and different ways to be together until this thing blew over. I was video chatting multiple times a day with all of my friends and family. I walked a nearby track with one neighbor daily. Our next door neighbor was outside working on various home improvement projects. And we would sit in the driveway watching our kids play and talk to him over the fence while he worked. My husband built multiple raised garden beds for me so that I could garden to my heart's delight and grow some of the produce that had become scarce in the grocery stores. We had a lot of lettuce this summer, my friends. I embraced the idea of homeschooling my preschool, and we painted and made fruit preserves and read stories and took walks after the rain looking for worms to rescue. That was the first couple weeks. I think that during that time, we all felt as though we were living in a bit of an alternate reality. We understood that we were living history, but I sure did not believe we would spend an entire year this way. And when it started to become clear that this thing wasn't actually ending anytime soon, and that this would be our new normal, whatever that means, and that we had to get on with our lives because we live in a country that values money and productivity over human life, we found ourselves, like the Israelites, who had only days prior been celebrating liberation, thrust into this wilderness and wondering how some of our most basic needs would be met. Of course, the pandemic wilderness experience has been different for everyone. There's no question that some have lost and suffered more than others. But no matter who you are, or what kind of wilderness you've been traversing over this past year, you've likely been faced with some difficult truths about yourself and the people and the community around you. Because the structures and the routines and so many of the other distractions that we may have used to avoid those truths had collapsed. And despite the busyness and anxiety of this time, we've been left with a kind of isolation and stillness that would not have been found otherwise. We began to notice things and ask questions. What is there if there is not this? What meaning is there in our work and our routines and the education of our children if it doesn't protect or fulfill us? Have we been sold a dream and a set of values that are just not real? And what does that mean about the choices that we have made in our lives up to this point? Choices that were grounded in this false reality. I saw a meme online just before the new year started. It said, 2020 was basically like a therapist who forced the entire population to go through 9-month shadow work journey without any consent or preparation on how the session would go. I wholeheartedly agree with this. Only I would apply it to more than just 2020. I would apply it to this entire pandemic experience. We've learned a lot about ourselves and the people we share community with. We've been facing our demons as a country, in our communities, faith communities included, in our families, and as individuals. We've been forced to look inward and examine ourselves. something I think that a lot of people spend their entire lives trying to avoid, trying not to do. And through all of this, we've been cut off from the rest of the world, experiencing much of it through a computer screen, feeling powerless, and with limited capacity to participate in the kind of outward, direct community action that so many friends consider central to our faith. It is understandable that so many people feel as though we've fallen behind or that we've lost valuable time. But I would argue that those things that we value, those things that are foundational to our faith as friends and seekers of the truth, real justice, real community, real and healthy relationships with one another and with Spirit. All of those things require considerable inner work as well as outward action. Yes, we know that we are better collectively than we are alone. Yes, we know that intentional and direct action are vital to creating the kind of world that is not only survivable, but thrivable for everyone. But if we don't make the effort to seek the truth within ourselves, if we don't enthusiastically jump into this shadow work with both feet and unravel our own tangled up parts and our own damaged and damaging beliefs, no one wins and no one shines. And this brings me back to our reading for this morning. Why this particular reading, Corin? Sure, I'm talking about the wilderness, but I could flip to just about any page in the book of Exodus and find a great example of Israelites being scared in the wilderness. It's the theme. And then maybe I could even have found one without all this business about diseases being brought upon Egyptians, because let's all be honest, that feels gross. But the reason that I chose this particular reading is because not only can we find parallels between our modern day pandemic wilderness and that of the Israelites, but we can also find an answer. We can also find comfort in God's words, words that are particularly meaningful to this friend. God says, listen carefully to the voice of the Lord your God. For I am the Lord who heals you. I'm the Lord who heals you. This year has not been wasted, friends. We are here in this place at this time, coming to terms with the reality of our lives, our community, and our country so that we can heal. God heals us in the wilderness.